Hey buddies, Miss Puggy here, coming at you with another Hearthstone video. Today I'm going to show you a Lady Prestor deck that is able to climb the ladder very easily. I've seen huge success with all my rank matches, and I had a lot of control in it so you can actually get to the late game, because the Lady Prestor doesn't actually play very well until you get turn 6 and on, and because of that you need as much control as possible. So I am using a Warrior. Warrior has a lot of control and a lot of different cards you can use to destroy a lot of minions on the board or even get some armor on yourself. Before we get into the meat potatoes of this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. You have no idea how much it helps me out, and let's get into it. So let's first talk about a curve. The curve right here looks a little heavy around 2 and 3. That's because we need to be able to survive the early game turns before we can get to the late games, because if we aren't able to survive late game, we aren't going to obviously win. Like most of the time, if you're playing against a rush deck, more than likely going to lose 5 times out of 10 because it's a very slow deck, but we have a lot of control in this deck that allows us to counter those in case we come across that. The deck does play the best around control or mid-range decks because those are a lot slower, but I want to go through the cards here and explain why this deck is a lot better than people initially thought. To make Lady Prestor work as much as possible, of course we need minions that have a lot of health and a lot of attack, because all of the cards in our deck are going to be transformed into random dragons. Now in standard we get a lot of good dragons for the most part. In wild you're going to get a lot of variety, so I wouldn't recommend using this deck in anything but standard, but in standards there's a lot of powerful dragons that you can get, so you want as many minions that you normally don't see in a deck that have a lot of ill effects when you summon them. Like right off the bat I have Injured Marauder. Injured Marauder is just a 4 cost 5/10, but when you summon them it turns into a 5/4 because it injures itself. Now this is usually not seen ever in any deck, but when you transform into a random dragon, that's a pretty beefy dragon to have on the board for a 5/10, especially if you get like Ysera or Alexstrasza or something like that. Let's go down the list real quick. First we have the 1 mana 2/2 demon that a lot of warrior decks like to use. This is an amazing card. You can just plop down on turn 1 or any turn really, because in 2 turns you'll get a 2/2 on the board with a 3/2 axe in your hand that allows you to eliminate a lot of threats on the board or even destroy some combo pieces that are being summoned on the board during the early games, so that's very awesome to have. Second, we have Armor Smith. This gives us more survivability. Armor Smith is a great card to have out there any stage of the game and still have a lot of value with it. Of course it's going to have more value early game where it's harder to get rid of, but you do get armor and usually a card people target, I've noticed in my ladder experience, so it's very cool. Now next we have Imprisoned Vile Fiend. So as we keep going down the list you're going to notice a lot of cards that you normally don't see, and Vile Fiend is actually a pretty okay card. Now if you get any of these cards in your hand, Lady Prestor is not going to be able to transform them, so if you see any bad cards that get in your hand and you are just like, okay, well I gotta play it, just don't feel too bad about playing the cards, especially like Vile Fiend. It essentially is actually a pretty decent card to eliminate threats on the board. So if you see this in the hand or like any bad card in your hand, you just got to drop it because you're not going to be able to do much with it otherwise. Next we have Information, which has a lot of value. You get 2 random taunt minions. This allows you to force players to actually hit minions so they can't rush you as hard, so it's a very valuable card to have. I normally get pretty decent cards with this, and it's just 2 mana, so it's an instant include into pretty much any warrior deck. Then we have Mana Feeder, which is really not that great of a card, but it is a great card to have in case you want to get some draw on your turns, because you're going to want to draw as much as possible with this deck as soon as Lady Prestor gets on the field. The minions that get transformed into dragons aren't going to do you any good until they get into your hand. Mana Feeder is just a kind of an easy card to activate that. A lot of the time when you get it early game, it's kind of a dead card. Of course you could play it early game. If worse comes to worse and you really just need to summon it on turn 2, I probably wouldn't recommend that. If you really need to, it is a 2/3 on the board if you need it. Next we have Minefield, which is an amazing board clear. Now you're not going to see a lot of minions on your board, so this is going to be targeting all the enemy minions for the most part. Since we have 4 dormant cards that are early game, a lot of times you'll have that onto the field and then you'll have a Minefield in your hand, so you won't be able to target those dormant cards, so it's really easy to control the board while still having some board presence at the same time in future turns. Next we have Slam, which is a really good warrior card. It allows you to just essentially get a draw, and you could use it to eliminate some targets. We have this card, which is pretty much just an assassinate. You want 2 of those in this deck because you want to be able to control the board as much as possible. If the enemy puts out a really tough minion, if they're playing mid-range or a big deck, you can use this to just eliminate them right away. And then we have 2 Injured Blade Masters. Once again, it's a 4/7. That's essentially a 4/3, but once it gets transformed to a dragon, it's a 3 costing minion. That's a 4/7, very easy. We have King Mukla, 3 mana 5/5. Once again, it's a good body. You don't want to summon it if you have it in your hand, but you know, if you draw it, you kind of have to. You just got to hope that you don't draw a lot of these cards, really. And then we have Rust Root Viper. Rustroot Viper is a tradable card, so you can use this to draw a new card. This is very, very useful to search for Lady Prestor or a lot of the other search cards that puts Lady Prestor into your hand. And in case your opponent is using a weapon, you can destroy the weapon with this card. And with a lot of the new cards, a lot of people are attacking in those profession weapons just to try them out. So it is nice to eliminate those on the board, or if you're playing a Shaman, you can eliminate those as well. As mentioned before, we have 2 Injured Marauders, which is a 5/10 4-cost minion, which is very, very useful once it gets transformed to a dragon, but otherwise it's a taunt on the board if you really, really need it. Then we have Rancor, which is a great card that eliminates some rush board presence because it puts armor onto your hero as well, so you can gain some survivability from that as well. 2 Brawls, because Brawl is like one of the best control cards. Just yesterday, actually, I had 6 minions on the enemy board. I had 1 minion on my board. I played Brawl and it destroyed all the minions except for mine and the Paladin I was playing again. Probably like really, really mad, but you know, that's why Brawl's awesome and sometimes works super, super good. And even if it doesn't, it eliminates a lot of presence on the board if you're getting rushed down or some key pieces on the enemy board. Then we have Lore Keeper, which is a 4/5, reorders your deck to the highest cost is at the front and lowest costs are at the bottom. If you have this card in your hand, you can play it turn 5 and the next turn you'll have guaranteed Lady Prestor, which is really, really awesome. Then we have another taunt minion. You'll see a lot of taunt minions in this deck because we want to, if we draw into them, be able to control the board as much as possible, stall the enemy. That's really the name of the game, stalling the enemy until you get Lady Prestor on the board. This gives you armor onto your hero and is a beefy 4/5 taunt. Very, very good card to have out on the field whenever you have it in your hand. Then we have Stone Maul Anchorman. Now this is a rush minion that a lot of warrior mains see in their decks. It's really a eliminate a monster on the board and draw, usually in most cases, especially turn 5. Really good card to have 2 of, so that's why we're running 2. And then we have Forge Ring, which pretty much is another one of those cards like Lore Keeper that allows you to draw into Lady Prestor. Now you gotta rely on your opponent destroying this, so it's not as reliable as Lore Keeper, but it's still a nice card to be able to get Lady Prestor because we want as many cards that allows us to draw into her, because if we don't get her into our hand, we're basically gonna lose. So the main thing you really want to do is try to mulligan all the cards in your hand unless you have some good control onto your hand. Normally, I like to try to get some of the Imprisoned Demon into my hand on my first mulligan, or even try to get some Minefields because it allows you to eliminate the board very, very easily. Otherwise, you're pretty much looking to either have Lady Prestor, Forge Ring, or Lore Keeper in your hand. If you have one of those, I would just keep it in your hand. You're basically going to be set and try to look for the controls in your hand as well. As I said, it's a very slow deck, so you're not going to be able to put a lot of minions on the board, so you pretty much want to try to get either Vilefang or the Demon onto the board so you can summon them 2 turns later, and essentially with the demon you can have the 3/2 axe that allows you to clear a lot of minions. Oftentimes you want to be going first because if you have a coin, you're going to be put in a weird awkward spot because a lot of the times your coin isn't going to be very useful if you're around turn 5 or 6, because you're going to want to either use Lore Keeper or Forge Ring turn 5, and then you'll be able to summon Lady Prestor on turn 6. So a lot of times this deck does perform a lot better on first turn. If you do get a coin, you know, going to second, it does allow you to mulligan a little bit more, but you primarily want to use that coin to cast a control spell or save it in your hand until you find a use for it. You probably want to use it sooner than later to activate some spells, or, I mean, it's probably a bad move. I wouldn't really recommend it. I guess you could do turn 1 coin into armor. I've seen some people say that's actually a good move, but I don't think it's actually that great of a move. The deck really, it does feel a lot awkwarder when you're going second because there's not a lot of pieces that you want to summon out right away. I suppose you could summon Scrap Golem or maybe even the Anchorman, but most of the time I don't find a lot of uses for the coin whenever I go second. Maybe you guys have more success going second. So your win rate is definitely a lot better if you go first on this particular deck. And then finally, and obviously, we have Lady Prestor. It's surprisingly really good despite a lot of the hate it gets on the theory crafting side of the spectrum. I've drawn so many good dragon cards. I don't know if I'm just really lucky with my draws or my RNGs, like really, really good, but Lady Prestor has been able to transform most of my minions into a lot of great cards. And I've seen a lot of Bright Wings, which puts a random legendary into your hand, which can be very, very useful. I climbed the ladder super, super easily with this deck, and I'm excited for you guys to try it as well. There's going to be a deck recipe in the comments and description if you guys want to try this deck out. It's a great legend deck, climbed the ladder for me super, super easily, and I bet you guys are going to have a lot of success with it as well. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I hope y'all have a great day. Bye-bye.
And the last shall be first to immerse in a pass out heat, facing him up with a moxie melt till he woke up drowning in tchotchke hell. More in a cave with a torch on a wall than a window arrangement of porcelain dolls.